It's just a matter of time.
It's just a matter of time.
It's just a matter of time.
For the lost and astray to find.
And one must be shown the way home. Those sacred few always knew that this time resurrection,
inner direction,
deliverance
would come through peace.
Those sacred few always knew that this time the cycle of the self would decline.
The self will end and the essence of life will begin again. In the water.
It's just a matter of time.
If one truly desires to detox, purge, and heal, one must acknowledge the errors of the deified self and cease to accuse and blame others for the problems that one now faces as a result of assimilating, integrating, and adopting attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs that oppose the essence of one's earth solar being as a child of the sun. In other words, once one stops focusing on the errors that exist beyond one's control, one can begin to identify those errors that one is personally accountable and responsible for, so that one can implement the kinds of corrective actions that will assist one in making whole life change. Thus, we cannot ignore the adverse effects of the white supremacy ideology that has emerged, either overtly or covertly, within this most recent 500-year cycle of time. We cannot ignore the attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs that were forwarded before, during, and after the Christopher Columbus invasions into the, quote, New World. We cannot ignore the blood-spilling nature of the white supremacy ideology that blindsided Christopher Columbus and his Spanish conquistadors, as well as the Portuguese, who were simultaneously invading Africa under the same banner of the Roman Catholic Church. We remind you that this bloodstained banner spread the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, as the Arab Muslims deeply indulged in their own mission to dominate, control, and rule during the trans-Saharan slave trade era. You see, the age of conquest that had been anointed by the so-called Semite, Hittite, and Aryan invaders was taking a new turn as onlookers watched the success of the color-coded caste system established by the Brahmin Hindu caste system in India. Yes, this would be the explosive era of self-deified conquest that spread the plague-like contamination of the pale mental mindset throughout the planet. We cannot ignore the nature of those cold, blood-spilling attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs that inspired the vicious acts of slaughter, rape, enslavement, theft, and the overall total disregard for the life energy of those melanin-encoded populations who were intruded upon with malicious intent.
Quote, under British colonial law, the indigenous aboriginal suntan inhabitants had no property rights in their own land, and the legal structures of colonization granted ownership of the entire continent of Australia to the British government. The doctrine of terra nullius, as unowned land or no man's lands, free for the taking, remained the law in Australia throughout the colonial period, and indeed right up to 1992. End quote. From the prophetic 12,594-year Banu cycle, encoding the consciousness of higher peace through the divine union of masculine and feminine energy by High Priest Kwatamani.
No, it would be totally unjust if we ignored the fact that the European invaders were heavily influenced by self-deified superiority when they invaded the melanin-encoded populations. No, we cannot ignore the pale religious leaderships that anointed the blood-spilling monotheistic nature documented in the following decrees of Western culture.
Quote, Dum Diversus is a papal bull issued on June 18, 1452, by Pope Nicholas V, that is credited by some with, quote, ushering in the West African slave trade. Dum diversas provided, quote, we grant you by these present documents, with our apostolic authority, full and free permission to invade, search out, capture, and subjugate the Saracens and pagans and other unbelievers and enemies of Christ, wherever they may be, as well as their kingdoms, duchies, counties, principalities, and other property, and to reduce their persons into perpetual slavery. End quote.
For those who are still in denial, let's look a little deeper into the attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs of Western culture that has influenced the thinking, reasoning, and actions of so many.
Quote, Ethiopians were often idealized as pious and blameless people in the writings of the ancient Greeks, such as Homer. But in European Christian eyes, Ethiopians were monstrous, principally owing to their black skin, which was considered a demonic feature. Black was a color associated with evil, sin, and the devil. On a far less spiritual plane, black African features were considered ugly by white European Christians, who often compared black people to apes or demons. For example, Marco Polo, writing near the end of the 13th century, had only this to say of the inhabitants of Zanzibar. Quote, they are quite black and go entirely naked, except that they cover their private parts. Their hair is so curly that it can scarcely be straightened out with the aid of water. They have big mouths, and their noses are so flattened and their lips and eyes so big that they are horrible to look at. Anyone who saw them in another country would say they were devils. End quote.
When we consider such blind-sighted perceptions, it is then no wonder that anyone who has integrated, assimilated, and adopted the attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs of such a mindset would spend much of their life energy bleaching, perming, straightening, rejecting one's natural and innate skin tone and hair texture. It is not coincidental that those of pale skin did look down upon the melanin-coated population as being cursed heathens who were ungodly. These perceptions remain regardless of the fact that the populations first encountered were peace-loving, vegetation-consuming people.
The Inter Cetera, a papal bull, special decree by the Pope, issued by Pope Alexander VI in 1493, described populations that were discovered in very remote islands and even mainlands that hitherto had not been discovered by others, quote, wherein dwell very many peoples living in peace, and as reported, going unclothed and not eating flesh, end quote, from Banu Book 1.
We cannot ignore the cold, pale, destructive nature of the white supremacy mindset and its adverse effects against melanin-coated populations throughout the world, be it Africa, the Caribbean, North, South, and Central America, be it Australia, India, Asia, or any others whose melanin-rich encodes differ from the norms of the white supremacy profile.
Quote, historical notes tell us that Columbus ran his flagship, the Santa Maria, aground on the island of Hispaniola in 1492. Records indicate that the Taino people helped rescue Columbus and his invading Spanish crew and helped salvage the shipwrecked Santa Maria. In his journals, Columbus wrote of the peaceful, generous nature of the Taino people. He noted their language did not have a word for war. He named them, quote, Indios, and referred to the Taino people as, quote, children of God. But he also wrote, quote, I could conquer the whole of them with 50 men and govern them as I pleased, end quote.
The historic proof of the bitter and toxic nature of the white supremacy mindset is undeniable, in your face and blatant. A cold and pale mindset that is the fueling source for hate crimes and brutalizing acts against humanity, Mother Earth, and all living things thereof.
Requerimiento, document written by Juris Palacios Rubios of the Council of Castile, 1510, quote, I certify to you that with the help of God, we shall powerfully enter into your country, and shall make war against you in all ways and manners that we can, and shall subject you to the yoke and obedience of the church and of their highnesses. We shall take you and your wives and your children, and shall make slaves of them, and as such shall sell and dispose of them as their highnesses may command. And we shall take away your goods, and shall do you all the mischief and damage that we can." End quote. From Exposing the Ice-Cold Deep Freeze Mentality and Whole Life Healing of Sexual Energy Within the Divine Parallel by High Priest Kwatamani.
We note that although the historic perpetrators of the white supremacy mindset has been, quote, white, there are many, quote, blacks, browns, yellows, reds, and the likes thereof, who have integrated, assimilated, and adopted the exact same cold and pale oppositional nature. Our point in all of this is there is a desperate need to detox, purge, and heal from the traumatic residue of the adverse effects of the white supremacy ideology. We have a pressing question. Yes, we're going to press the issue. Who's fooling who within the white supremacy ideology? What is the real agenda of this monotheistic male whose psychotraumatic warring mindset is fueled by sexual violation, violence, war, and crime? There's no question that man, he, and she emerged as natural and innate, melanin-encoded plant-based consumers within a green earth garden culture ecology.
Quote, "Early human ancestors made a drastic shift in their diet from eating exclusively fruits and leaves to including grasses and succulents about 3.5 million years ago," new research suggests. The new results, published in several studies in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. A recent article states, quote, "Modern vegetarians may have more in common than they thought with the ancient Egyptians, because it is thought that they also ate a diet composed largely of vegetables, fruit, wheat, and barley. Archaeologists have thought for a while that most settled ancient populations survived on a vegetarian diet, and now carbon isotope analysis has given experts a better idea than ever before of what the ancient Egyptians ate." End of quote.
The ancestral memory of this magnificent emergence is recorded in the DNA, orchestrating the higher conscious evolution of man, he and she. Scientific research reveals that the optimum environmental condition for the birth of man, he and she, occurred within the hinterlands of Mother Africa, now called Ethiopia, Tanzania, Chad, and Kenya, within the equatorial solar regions of tropical rainforests and savannas. We note that an estimated 80% of the Earth's food supply originated from rainforest vegetation. Rainforest has been known as the, quote, lungs of the world because about 20% of the world's oxygen is produced within that environmental womb. We're speaking of the optimum physical environment that did forward our melanin-coated presence as man, he, and she, providing the optimum food supply that fueled our optimum earth solar conscious existence within a state of wholesome mental, physical, and spiritual health and well-being. Within our sacred ancestral memory, there is such a thing as moral conscience, which is a natural and innate sense of wholesome health and well-being, not only for the individual body, but for the wholeness of our existence as man, he, and she. This is where the self-deifying nature of ego-driven individualism falls short. The white supremacy ideology has mutated and degenerated the moral consciousness of mass population, causing a disconnection from each other, and therefore a mass disconnection from our sacred ancestral spirit presence as divine children of the sun. Yes, there is mental, physical, and spiritual mutation and degeneration. We note that genetic mutations do occur within the diverse melanin-coated gene pool that births all of man, he and she. However, those mutations are corrected by being absorbed back into the dominant genetic depository of our earth solar conscious state of being. Those populations who are referred to as, quote, whites, are merely the truth and the consequence of a genetic mutation that did produce a form of albinism as it expresses melanin depletion. The inbreeding of these mutated genetic encodes caused distinct mental, physical, and spiritual characteristics to become an isolated group phenomenon.
A recent article notes, quote, "A scan of all the mutations in the human gene map shows something surprising. People of European descent are evolving fast, and not for the better. The study finds that in the past 5,000 years, European Americans have developed a huge batch of potentially harmful genetic mutations, many more than African Americans."
The DNA provides instructions on a physical level for the replication of the cells. Those instructions have both a seen and unseen presence. We have heard much about the mystery systems of ancient time. Yet, when you take a look at living energy, the great mystery becomes really simplified. Just use the example of a seed that falls to the ground and sprouts roots. Those are the roots that bear the tree, that then bear the branches, leaves, flowers, and the fruit of the seed of life. If one looks at a papaya, the avocado, a mango, one will be reminded of the feminine essence of she, who holds the uterus, the womb of life, that produces the egg, the seed. If one looks at a banana, a cucumber, and okra, one will be reminded of the masculine essence of he, who holds the phallus, the giver of fertilizing sperm. He who receives, ejaculates, guides, and protects his seed to secure she, who receives, carry, and birth, and nurture the forward multiplication of his and her offspring and vibration in divine order. The essence of man, he and she, is just that simple. And in this whole life process, there is no space or place for the asserted will of individualistic self-deification. If you live within the garden culture environment, this example becomes very simple and easy to relate to. However, let us take nothing for granted, because the death-consuming culture has orchestrated mind control that disconnects one from the source of one's green earth food supply. One becomes disconnected from the essence of life and supreme love, producing an altered state of reality, where one's fruits and vegetables come from a can and freezers and plastic packages and artificial flavors and powders in a box. Let us continue. The fruits bear the seed that multiply the essence of that first seed that fell into fertile soil as a child of earth, wind, rain, and sun. However, if there was an adversely affected branch due to a lack of sunshine or whatsoever, one can expect that the DNA encodes of that fruit will express errors of discoloration or some other form of depletion. The blighted seed would either return to the soil and re-emerge into the organic living matters of its origin, or the seed will continue to produce a lower and lesser quality of fruit within the universal law of diminishing return to the point of extinction. In other words, this blighted seed scenario is exactly what happened to those populations who did branch off of the sacred ancestral melanin-encoded family tree. The adversely affected branches that suffer from a lack of solar radiation and whole life nutrients produced a blighted fruit of a blood-spilling, hunting, herding, warring culture. The blighted fruit of the hunting, herding, warring culture does not represent the natural and innate qualities of man, he, and she that are forwarded as the essence of the original first fruit, the divine children of the sun. Therefore, there would come a time of diminishing returns. We're stating that the white supremacy ideology fails to recognize the essence of humanity, fails to recognize the sacred ancestral spirit presence of melanin-coded populations throughout the planet Earth, who are the remaining traces of the parenting source of our own existence as man, he, and she.
Quote, In 1987, a worldwide survey of mitochondrial DNA was able to determine that all people are related via some original mother, which they called the, quote, mitochondrial Eve, end quote, who had lived around 200,000 years ago in Africa.
We note that the mitochondria, the energy source of every living cell, provides DNA encodes that are carried in the female only. Research indicates that mitochondrial DNA is transferred from mother to daughter, generation after generation. Make no mistake, it is the female, by virtue of her mitochondrial link to our sacred ancestral melanin-encoded mother and source, who forwards the natural innate drive to seek the highest possible cellular energy, whole life energy. It is indeed her natural and innate drive to seek and search to reconnect with her sacred ancestral melanin-encoded presence by interlinking with the ancestral masculine male. The renegade male is the son birthed out of error, the error that emerged out of a hunting, herding, warring culture of blood spill and conquest. This error is an error that has formulated against divine order. The renegade male and his individualistic, monotheistic self-deification is an overbloated, ego-driven bully who seeks and searches to destroy as his means of proving his macho manhood. Thus, all of those influenced by the attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs of self-deifying individualism has created a Western culture female who can't get no satisfaction. And she can't figure out why. Her natural and innate appetite is unfulfilled by the blighted and depleted nature of the renegade male. And she can't figure out why she has eating disorders, depressions, and emotional instability, addictions and mental afflictions, fibroids and other ailments. She can't figure out why she has become the ultimate drama queen, the ultimate consumer, materialism run amok. The female who seeks to re-emerge into her sacred ancestral nurturing essence must be aware that the disciples and followers of the white supremacy mindset are in no way limited by the color of one's skin, although the social construct of white privilege has been based on whiteness as defined by melanin-depleted skin tone. She must be aware of the fact that the white supremacy mindset does adversely affect anyone and everyone who aligns with the attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs forwarded through the consciousness of self-deification. And as such, the pale mental mindset can and does manifest in a darker pigmentation of mental paleness. We are talking about that dark pale, life-depleting male who ejaculates his life-depleting sperm cells into a female, turning her energy cold and pale. Nevertheless, be it the darkest of the pale mental mindset or the palest of the pale mental mindset, the self-deified nature will intensify its satanic, Luciferian, and devilish ways by any means necessary in a desperate struggle to project ascension into a superior consciousness, a higher state of self-deified righteousness. Therefore, any male whom this female nurtures, who have not applied the holistic living means necessary to detox, purge, and heal from this cold and pale ordeal, will continue to perpetuate the self-deifying energies of conflict, confusion, and chaos, so as to destabilize the natural and innate divinity of her femininity. And so long as she continues to consume of the lower and lesser nature of individualistic self-deification, the worst is yet to come. However, once her inner eyes are opened, the female, the mother of us all, will see that the self-deified monotheistic male's greatest target of violence, abuse, and other disrespect has been she, the essence of femininity, Mother Nature, Mother Earth. She will quietly review everything she knows and has encountered about the renegade male of Western culture, his white supremacy ideology that targets racism but begins with sexism and continues in every other ism and schism that one can imagine. She will review his attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs regarding the female his cold and pale sexuality, his inability to offer a holistic living environment to secure the wholesome and healthy well-being of the generation next. Mother Nature is indeed taking the laws into her own hand, and no show of brute force can conquer the natural and innate biology of masculine and feminine energy. The renegade male will be trumped by a much greater presence, especially when the joker is wild. Who's fooling who about the superiority of the renegade male, his white supremacy mindset, and his blood-spilling hunting and herding warring culture that opposes the essence of life and supreme love? We have this riddle of wit that is left for you to fiddle with. In 1492, the Arab Muslims were selling African slaves through the Jew to those who said their blood was blue. In 1492, the Inquisition was imposed against the Jew. In 1492, Columbus and his conquistador crew sailed the ocean blue in search of that land that the African Moors said existed for truth, in a resettlement plan to clear the Spanish land of those who were known to be a Jew. And what did the Taino population do to be raped, enslaved, slaughtered, and sent to the grave by Christopher Columbus and his conquistador crew during the resettlement time of the self-defined Aryan Christian Jew? And this is what I have to say to each and every one of you.
Hey, Nakaboo, you tell me true. Is it the Aryan or Jew, or you, boo-boo, falling even further behind, following this pale state of mind?
This supreme spiritual exorcism will continue as part 9.
A Messiah has come, take us higher. He and she
I desire whole life energy. Higher.
reclaim our divinity.
Higher. Masculine, divine guidance and protection. It's about time.
Feminine, divine, nurturing affection.
He and she divine.
It was about that time for whole life change. In fact, all that remained of the inner essence of man, he and she was crying out for change.